hometown. I grew up just outside of Cairo. I miss my home county this time more than any other, Alexander County. I miss the smell when you walk outside at night. It smells like the whole world is alive. Everything in bloom, and the birds and the bees and the trees and the plants are all getting it on. I miss the sounds at night. The crickets and the cicadas and the bullfrogs. I miss the frogs the most. I've lived here 20 years and I've yet to see one fucking frog in Chicago. That's bullshit. I miss the 3 rivers that surround where I live. 3 of them causing heat and humidity you can't even begin to imagine. Some days you wake up, take a shower, you don't dry off the rest of the day. I also miss vandalizing things to break the monotony. Like stealing shopping carts from the IGA and driving down Commercial Avenue in Joe Crane's red 1977 Chevrolet Malibu at 70 miles per hour, and 3 of us holding onto the shopping cart out the passenger side window. 70 is about as fast as a shopping cart will do before the wheels fall off. I can tell you that from experience, I know. Commercial was once, well, very commercial. It stretches the entire east side of Cairo. It's very wide. There used to be lots of businesses on it. In 1970s, when a lot of older cities were replacing their downtowns, they came to Cairo on Commercial Avenue and just took whole wrought iron storefronts away. Destroyed our buildings downtown. But we'd take that shopping cart, we'd get up to 70, and we'd drive down Commercial, and we'd slam on the brakes, let go of the shopping cart. And that shopping cart would take off and smash into these barricades set up in front of a giant sunken-in portion of Commercial Avenue that Cairo was too broke to fix. Huge portions of various streets all around town would cave in due to the fact that they were very old, and the town is on a peninsula surrounded by 2 of the continent's largest rivers. Unstable ground, literally and figuratively. We never got in trouble with the police for stealing shopping carts, and this was after my dad was no longer the sheriff, so he wasn't protecting us. I guess there were too many shootings to worry about grocery carts being launched into sinkholes. We almost got shot once, though. Deserved it, too. There was a one-legged man named Busby who lived in his pickup truck with 5 or 6 dogs. He'd park his pickup truck at various spots around town and try to catch a little shut-eye. His old beat-up truck. And I had a Q-beam spotlight. About 5 or 6 of us would pile in a car. We'd find out where Busby was sleeping. We'd drive up and flash that light in his truck. "We're coming to get you, Busby!" He'd wake up. He had no teeth. The dogs would bark, and he looked like an alien. "Ah, ah, ah!" We thought it was real funny until he chased us through town with a shotgun one night. That put the end of that. That and the fact that Busby was murdered later on that summer. I miss buying beer underage. It's not as much fun when you can legally buy beer. I bought my first beer at the Travel Hut by the interstate when I was just out of 6th grade. And my dad was sheriff at the time. I don't know what the clerk was thinking selling the sheriff's son a beer at 12 years old. The Travel Hut had this big round cooler shaped like a big giant beer can right next to the register. It was full of ice and single beers of different types. Don't drink and drive. Frank Simpson, Brad Newton, and I rode our bikes to the Travel Hut and walked in, and each pulled a bush beer, put it on the counter, and Alan Pitcher rang it up without batting an eye. I know what you're thinking. Bush beer? I was 12, okay? It was very much in style around there then. A popular t-shirt worn by women in Cairo at the time read, "If you like my mountains, you'll love my bush." Classic. 1979. My favorite time buying beer underage was when I was in high school. Usually buying beer was no problem by then, but occasionally there were crackdowns and the cops were looking out and the various places we usually went to wouldn't sell it to us, so we had to get more creative. Like going to Klondike. Klondike is a little village north of our farm along Route 3, next to the Mississippi Levee. I have no idea why it's named Klondike. It's not the type of place you want to go prospecting for gold. It's not very much frozen. It's in southern Illinois. It was an entirely African American community and very poor. Its white equivalent was on Route 51. It was named Urbandale. Urbandale was not at all urban. My friend Brent lived in Urbandale, and one time I gave him a ride home. He lived in an old Sears and Roebuck kit house from the early 20th century on Sears Roebuck Road. And the night I gave him a ride home, I pulled up to his house. His house was set back from the road a little bit. And there was, like in the rural areas, there's a post with a mailbox at the end of the driveway. And he had chained to his mailbox with a big chain 4 or 5 times around a barbecue grill. He had it chained so tight the barbecue grill was just hanging there in suspension in midair. That's Urbandale. There was another shanty town named Future City, which I hope is not the future. If it is, we're all in trouble. A post-apocalyptic future. No flying cars in Future City, just cars up on blocks. There's another village in the county named Olive Branch. It's not at all peaceful like the name implies. It's quite the opposite, as a matter of fact. I don't know who named these towns. They really got it all wrong. Klondike, though, had this really cool old roadhouse type bar with lit up in neon. My favorite bar name, Vera's Atomic Club. When I was a kid, I'd drive past there and I imagined there were people in radiation suits and lab coats and they're having a drink. But the thing I miss most about this time of year, where I'm from, is scooping beans. We had a farm. We raised soybeans and winter wheat. My dad had 2 other jobs. He was elected county sheriff, and he worked on the railroad. And I know what you're thinking, probably, it's a lot of jobs for the sheriff. Probably not a lot of crime got sold, and you'd be right. One year a man ran against him that said, his name was Lewis Mays. He ran a campaign, and the basis of his whole campaign was, I will be your full-time sheriff, implying that my dad was not a full-time sheriff, which he wasn't. On election night, my dad trounced him, and he opened a beer at the courthouse, and he said, the people have spoken, and they prefer a part-time sheriff. So when we were farming, my dad was always in a hurry because he had to go to the sheriff's office, he had to go work on the railroad, and always very frantic, and he had days where he couldn't farm. And my job when we were planting beans was to sit in a trailer in the middle of a field out in the middle of nowhere. And my dad would come up, and when the planter was empty, I'd hand down buckets of soybeans to make things go faster. He'd take the buckets of soybeans and dump them in the planter, and I'd hand him down another bucket. And it was a weird perspective because my dad was a huge man and I was a kid, and I never really saw him from that perspective. Looking up, and his face was all sweaty, and he was in a hurry. He really needed a beer, and I'd hand him the soybeans, and he'd dump them in, and then he'd take off. And my job was to get the buckets ready, filled up with soybeans, so when he came back, there was no delay. And I'd sit him up on top of the trailer on the ledge. I couldn't spill them, because if I did, that was a lot of money on the ground, and I'd get in trouble. But after I got the buckets filled, I could sit there, and I really didn't have anything. I couldn't read a book because it was dirty, and it was 85, 90, 95, 100 degrees, and I was in a metal trailer in the middle of a field with nothing to shade me from the sun. So to keep cool, I would burrow down in the beans. I would dig and claw and kick my legs down further and further into the soybeans, and as further I got down in the soybeans, the cooler it got. And I'd dig until there was nothing left but my head sticking out. And then I could sit there and daydream. Daydream of a time I didn't live in Cairo. Daydream of a time that I could marry the girl I had a crush on in 6th grade or play baseball for the St. Louis Cardinals. I could sit there and dream the afternoon away, covered in soybeans. And I wish I could do that again. And I know my kids will never get the chance to scoop soybeans.